the Daas Tevunos, in Rav Friedlander's version, we're on page 54. And in the English version that goes by paragraphs, we're in paragraph 69. And the topic that the Ramchal is talking about now is he's going to the last subject he said he wanted to talk about for this part of the Sefer. Instead of starting at the beginning, he goes to the end. The three subjects were man's existence, his deeds during his lifetime, and what are the fruits of those deeds. The fruits of the deeds is Tchias HaMesim. And therefore, he goes to that subject first. We explained the logic of that yesterday. If you know where you want to get to, then it's easier to get there. If you go into your car and you put Waze and you put in a place you want to get to, then you'll get all the details of how to get there. But first, you want your destination. You build a house, you have your plan, then you talk to the electrician and the plumber about how to put in the electricity and the plumbing. You cannot go to a plumber electrician and say, I'd like to build a house. How do I do the electricity? How many floors? How many sockets? How many lights? What's the plan? So we need to have the goal, and then we can fill in the details once we have the goal. So the Ramchal goes to the goal, and the goal is not Gan Eden. Gan Eden is a Chanaya. It's a parking place for a period of time before the ultimate Tchias HaMesim and Olam Haba occur. The ultimate goal of man's deeds, Tchias HaMesim. In that ultimate goal, the Ramchal said that we need to discuss three things. We need to discuss this whole idea that man is created with a guf and a neshama. There's no other creature like him. Either there's neshama, there's spirituality, it could be a malach, or there's gashmias, it could be a plant, it could be a crocodile. But to have a yitzira, sheyesh bo shtei yitziras, vayitza Hashem Elokim es ha'adam, the pasuk says that God formed man, and the word vayitzer is spelled with two yuds. Instead of one yud, it says vayitzer with two yuds. And one of the shitas and chazal is that the two yuds tell us that man has a double form. He has a guf and a neshama. So man is made up of these basic two component parts. And what we need to understand, the Ramchal said, are three distinct points in man's existence. Man's initial existence where the guf and the neshama live together. Then there's a point after 120 years, the guf goes where it goes and the neshama goes where it goes. They're separate. And then they come back together again at Tchias HaMesim. The neshama goes back into a new guf. We mentioned yesterday Machlekes Rambam and Ravid. The Ramchal is adamant about the fact that there is a guf to Tchias HaMesim and the neshama goes back into this guf. So now we're in actually paragraph 70 on page Nun Daled, Rav Friedlander, paragraph 80. I'm reading Rav Friedlander's caption, Beguf, the body, which is made of dust of the earth, it is not a spiritual thing in its initial creation. Hushrashu hachesroinus. It is a mundane thing that wants to do that which it enjoys. It enjoys pleasure and desire. That's what it is. It's a guf. And hushrashu hachesroinus. In this guf is the source and the root of imperfection. God created the perfectly imperfect world so that we can perfect it, and here we are. Each of us is not only living in this global perfectly imperfect world, but each of us is perfectly imperfect. Our imperfections have their source in the guf. The guf is the guf hushrashu hachesroinus. The source of imperfection lies in the guf. It is not a spiritual creation. Haneshama, on the other hand, the neshama, mitziusa tahar, its existence, its very formation is pure, it's spiritual. V'tafkid haneshama l'zakech es haguf. The purpose for which the neshama came down to this world and went into the guf, right? Everybody stand at attention now. One of the Yesoides of the Ramchal. Why did the neshama come down into the guf? L'zakech es haguf. That's the job of neshama. To purify the guf and lift up the guf so that the guf becomes a shtik neshama. V'zeh zchusa. And that becomes the zchus of the neshama. The ultimate zchus of the neshama is that it took the dust of the earth, lifted it up, and turned it into a spiritual existence. That is the job of the neshama, and that's the zchus that the neshama gets as its card to get into Olam Haba. Now, how do you mezakeh? How do you purify the guf? How do you uplift the guf from the pleasure, desire, existence of dust of the earth into a spiritual existence? So for that, the Rebbe Shalom gave us tools, Torah, mitzvahs, etc. These things, when done by the neshama through the guf, the teeth that eat the matzah, the tongue that is used in eating the matzah, the hands that are used for tefillin and shaking the lulav and esrog, the eyes that are used for studying Torah, the ears that are used to hear Torah, the brain that is used to think about Torah and necessary chachmas, etc., etc. These physical things now become spiritual. And that is what the Rabbeinu Shalom wants from the neshama. He puts the neshama into the guf and says, do your work. Lift this guf up. Lift it up. Make it spiritual. And that's your key to getting into Olam Haba. So the neshama says, but Rabbeinu Shalom, what am I supposed to do with this shtick dust? Well, how do I turn a shtick dust into something that will look like me, the neshama? I'm pure. I'm a chelek eliki mima. Rabbeinu Shalom, what kind of job are you giving me to turn the shtick off or the shtick dust into a holy thing? Rabbeinu Shalom says, here's the Torah, here's the mitzvahs, it can be done. The only thing you need to do, neshama, is need to harness in the guf and persuade the guf and work on the guf to make sure you are the balabayas over the life of this person, and so that this person's guf will follow your instructions. It'll do the mitzvahs, shema Torah mitzvahs, and therefore, once the guf gets that chinuch, a neshama is a machanech. Like a parent is machanech his children, the neshama is machanech the guf. There's a way a neshama is machanech the guf. The neshama is supposed to be talking to the guf. That's what this Daas Tevunos is about. There's a neshama talking to a seichel and a seichel talking to a neshama. We're supposed to be talking to ourselves. The neshama is supposed to be talking to the guf. We're supposed to be talking to ourselves. We should be doing this. We shouldn't be doing this. Here's the reason why. Here's the reason not. We should be thinking, people. The key word, as Rav Volbe says, the key word Rav Volbe writes in Al Yishur for the whole Mesilas Yesharim is the Mesilas Yesharim word of lehisbonin. It's a word used all over Mesilas Yesharim. Lehisbonin, to think. Instead of living like a para adam, instead of living like a wild man who does whatever he wants when he wants, you cool it. Stop. Should I? Shouldn't I? You're already working towards Avodas Hashem. The brief moment, which may turn into 2 moments, which may later turn into a minute, is Avodas Hashem. I'd like to do this. Should I or shouldn't I? What are the ramifications? What are the ramifications? We talked about that before Tisha B'Av in the Sugya of Kamtza and Bar Kamtza. And Ramchal talks about it in Perek Yutes, Perek Chof of Mesilas Yesharim. There are things that can look wonderful, and you want to do them instinctively because it's the right thing to do right now. But even if it's the right thing to do right now, you have to think it through. What are the ramifications for me, my family, my friends? What will be the result of what I'm doing? And it can be the greatest act in the world, but if it's going to harm someone down the road, you need to take that into cheshbon before you do what you're about to do, even if it's a great mitzvah. Ramchal gives examples of that. In fact, the Ramchal says that because these things were not thought through properly by Gedalia ben Achikam, because Gedalia ben Achikam did not think through a certain event properly, even though momentarily the decision was correct, he caused the death of thousands of Jews. And the Rebbe Yishaya ben Avkulas, who we spoke about the day before Tisha B'Av in the Gemara in Gittin, the Rabbi Yochanan said Rebbe Yishaya ben Avkulas caused the Churban. Ramchal Masil Sishorim says that the second Beis HaMikdash was hard because Rabbi Yishaya ben Avkulas failed to take into account the ramifications of the decisions he was making. So the guf is there to be like a para adam. I want this, I'm doing this. When are you doing it? Now. I'm not waiting. Not only am I doing it, I'm doing it now. And the neshama is supposed to be able to be a machana, slow. I know you want to do it now. Let's think about this. Is it good for you, guf? Is it good for me, neshama? After all, we do have to live together. And is it good for us together? Is this a good thing? Where is this going to lead us to? And what ramifications will it have on you, Mr. Guf? Stop and think. So the neshama is here and comes down to earth, the Ramchal says, and that's where Friedlander's captioned what we're about to learn, L'zakir es haguf, purify the body and lift it up so that the body, the guf, becomes a shtik neshama. And that is the ultimate merit of a neshama. It's opening, its key, its card to get into Olam Haba. What tools does the neshama use? Torah mitzvahs. Ayin. Amr HaSeichel, the Seichel said, HaKavona hel yoyin halo shamat kvar, heyoisa achla heitev adam. I already explained to you at the beginning of the Sefer that the Kavona el Yona, the motivation, or the will, God's will, ultimate will and motivation in creation, was to be mative, to bestow good on creation. To give a person an opportunity to take a perfectly imperfect Bria, including himself, and perfect it, and partner up with God in perfecting the Bria. And now we've come to the point where we need to discuss this in depth. At the beginning of the Sefer, I told you, the Ramchal says, that God created a perfectly imperfect world, and he wants you to join with him in perfecting the world. And now the Ramchal says we're coming to the point we need to discuss this. What is the perfection and what is the imperfection? We said God created a perfectly imperfect world. And then we went on and we said that God gives an opportunity to perfect the perfectly imperfect world, including ourselves, who we are each imperfectly imperfect. What is perfect and what is imperfect? Ki ha'elokim osa haguf hazeh chomer av v'choshev. The Rebbeinu Shalom made the body a dense, it's dust of the earth, it's dense. Dense means light doesn't shine through it. When we talk about spirituality, quote unquote, ruchnius, we talk about light. The light shines. Well, when something is very dense, light cannot shine through it. And the dust of the earth, the guf, is chomer av v'choshev. It's dense and dark. It's hard to get light through it. Bilti roy leor ba'ar kedushasa yisparach when they mizkei hashafel. It is virtually impossible. It's not roy. I shouldn't say virtually impossible. The way the guf was made is it's not made with the necessary recipe that would allow the light to shine in it, because that's how it was made. It was made from low dust. Ki ein lovay el shah hamelech ulovake bechole el shleme achvan. And we know that you can't enter a king's chamber unless you're properly dressed. You have to be suited up. You can't just walk into the Melech's chamber with dust all over you. Now, Kal v'choima, if you are dust, if you physically are dust, how do you walk in and be makabel pnei Shechina. How do you get to Olam Haba? Your dust, your guf. The only way that's possible is if the guf gets elevated to the point that it itself is distinct, is distinguished. And the guf at Chiyas HaMesim is so distinguished that it is roy, that it can also appear before the king. That's something that has to be accomplished during the lifetime. This dark density is the actual nature of the physicality of the body. And it is that guf that puts into the human being all the evil inclinations of the person. And it is that body, through trying to fulfill everything that it wants constantly, it is what leads the human being down the path of all kinds of terrible things that can happen to him. And then there's a second thing. God created the pure neshama. It comes out, right out. It is, so to speak, dug out right under the kisei hakavod. V'hayrida v'nafcha b'seich haguf hazel l'talakacha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu took the neshama down and put it as a breath. Vayipach ba'apav nishmas chaim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu put a breath into Adam, and that was his neshama. V'zeh ma shetzorech lahavin, and this is what you need to understand. Ki ein seif hakavana b'biyas haneshama b'guf l'shetich chaya oisa b'chaya hebel ha'ela. And the Mesilas Yesharim says this very, very, very clearly. One would have to be a fool to believe, once you believe in this idea, that there's a neshama in a guf. And we know that once the neshama is out of the guf is dead. We spoke about that several times when I brought up my story about the first time I had to do a tahara as a member of a Chevra Kadisha in Danville, Virginia. The body is there. The whole body is there, and you can't talk to it. Doesn't hear you. It doesn't respond. And an hour before the tahara, I was talking to this person, or an hour and a half before the tahara, I was learning Masechta Brachos with this person. An hour and a half later, I was doing a tahara on him. Where is he? His body is here. Why isn't he answering me? Because there's no neshama. So it would be foolish for a person to think that God sent down this holy neshama and put it in the guf, because without the neshama, the guf can't see and the guf can't hear. So God takes this neshama, which we will call the battery, he puts the battery inside the body, and now the body can look at anything it wants, hear whatever it wants, talk whatever it wants, do whatever it wants. The sole purpose of taking the neshama battery, this holy, spiritual neshama battery, and putting it into the guf is that the guf can pop up, open the eyes, open the ears, and then go off, do whatever it wants. That's the whole purpose of the holy neshama, is to give life into this physical body so that it can do whatever taiva it wants. One must be a fool to think of such a thing. And Rav Friedland in footnote 118 quotes the Mesilas Yesharim to the same effect. So if that's not the purpose of sending the neshama into the guf, just to give the guf life so that it can do what it wants, what is the purpose of sending the neshama into the guf? The very purpose of sending the neshama into the guf is so that the neshama can purify the guf, to lift up this guf, this dust of the earth, to lift it up by the guf allowing itself to be a vessel for Torah, avodah. That vessel now becomes sanctified like a malach. Imagine that. Your neshama goes into the guf, and with a proper amount of work and cooperation between the guf and the neshama, your guf can become as holy as a malachei hashores. And that's the tachlis of the neshama. And this has happened. It happens very rarely that the physical body can turn into mamash malach. It can turn into a shtik neshama. It happens rarely, but we can see that this has happened. my Moshe Rabbeinu. Shezacha v'zikach es chumra yosai ad sheshava madregas malach mamish ukvaro kol yisrael kikaran ar pnei Moshe. Pasuk says that the Jewish people were scared to approach Moshe Rabbeinu in Parshas Pekudei, Parshas Kisisa, kikaran ar pnei Moshe. Moshe's face, his skin, his flesh had such a shine that they couldn't even look at his face. Where did the shine come from? Simple. A person has a physical body, it's his guf. His flesh is his guf. That flesh is what we call the dense darkness of physicality. The neshama is a bright light. And the neshama's light can't get through this dense guf. But as the neshama is successful in transforming the guf into a spiritual item, and it transforms the guf into ruchnius, the guf becomes less and less dense. It becomes so less and less dense until it becomes transparent. It's so transparent that the light of the neshama shines through the skin and the flesh. And that's the meaning, kikaran ar pnei Moshe. Moshe had a shine to his face. You looked at his face, you saw a neshama. You didn't see flesh anymore. The flesh of the body is dust of the earth that's dense and dark, and the neshama light cannot shine through it. The more avodas Hashem a person does, the more the neshama takes reign over the guf, the more the guf transforms from dense to transparent until that guf flesh becomes so transparent that the light of the neshama can shine right through the flesh. And that's because the flesh is no longer a barrier to the neshama. It has become transparent and allows the light to shine through it, and it becomes lit. And that's Kikaran ar pnei Moshe. How many people can get this done? Okay, Moshe got it done. But it means that everyone has the potential to get it done at his own level. And when you get it done at your own level, you're Moshe. That's the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva. The Rambam says that anybody can be Moshe. Not anybody can be Moshe. What does the Rambam mean by anybody can be Moshe? It means that Moshe Rabbeinu had a neshama that was capable of X, and he hit X. If a person has a neshama that's only capable of A, and he works and gets to A, he's done what Moshe did. Moshe got to the much higher level X, and you got to the level of A, which is not as high, but you got to your full potential. You're like Moshe. So we see in the Bria there is a possibility to turn the physical, dense, dark guf into a shtik neshama. V'chanach v'Eliyahu nisal l'shamayim b'guf ha'mamish. Chanach at the end of Parshas Bereshis. Sorry, Chanach. Chanach at the end of Bereshis, at the end of Noach, I don't recall at the moment. Chanach. It says, Ve'inenu ki lokach osor Elokim. Chanach was a person who was a great tzaddik, and he died at a very young age. And it says, ki lokach, it doesn't say he died, it says, ki lokach osor Elokim. God took him. He never died. God took him up to Shemaim with his body. And Eliyahu, we read about in Sefer Malachim. Eliyahu went up in a fire chariot to heaven with his body. So we see that there's a possibility that a person can attain a level where his body is so holy that there's no reason it can't go up to heaven with the neshama as well. The tools that the Rebbeinu Shalom gave the neshama in order to elevate and make the body into something holy is the Torah and Kiyum mitzvahs. The more that a person works at acquiring Torah mitzvahs, he brings more and more purification to his physical body, and it becomes a zechus for the neshama. The neshama was sent to the guf to purify it. The neshama is working on it. It accomplishes it. Now the guf is spiritual, which is the will of Hashem. And who performed that? The neshama. it did the will of Hashem by lifting up the guf. And that's the schus of the neshama. Ayin Aleph will end with this, a very good question from the neshama to the seichel. Amar haneshama matzinu to'ela shleimus l'guf. Fine. I find that I understand what perfection means for the guf. The guf was dense and dark, and now the neshama went into it and lifted up the guf. The perfectly imperfect guf now became perfected. How? Through the neshama. Uzachus l'neshama. And I find now that this neshama has a merit. It merits getting to Olam Haba because it lifted up the guf. So the perfectly imperfect guf is perfected. Good. The neshama has a schus because it perfected it. But what perfection happened to the neshama? We'll talk about this question in Bli Neder tomorrow. There's a zechus and there's perfection. Obviously, the guf got perfected, and the neshama got merit for perfecting the guf. But since the neshama from the beginning was already perfect, what purpose? What does it get out of this whole thing? And we'll talk about that Bli Neder tomorrow. We mentioned that in this week's parsha we have the bracha of Birchas Hamazon, benching, and that bracha is made up midoraisa of 3 brachas. Pashut. There are 3 brachas in benching. Baruch atah Hashem hazon es hakol, for giving us food. Baruch atah Hashem al ha'aretz v'al hamazon. Thank you Hashem for Eretz Yisrael and for the food. And Baruch atah Hashem b'nei barachma Yerushalayim amen. Thank you for building Yerushalayim, and the Beis Hamikdash is included in there. The 4th bracha, Hatoiv HaMeitiv, we'll Hashem learn about on Wednesday. Wednesday is Tu B'Av. Tu B'Av is the day where Haruge Beitar were Nitnu L'Kvura, and that's the day that they established Hatoiv HaMeitiv. How that came into benching is a different question. We'll take a look at that on Wednesday, where we got the 4th bracha of Birchas Hamazon. The 4th bracha of Birchas Hamazon is a rabbinic mitzvah, a rabbinic bracha of Hatoiv HaMeitiv. The first 3 brachas, according to many shittas, all 3 are biblical requirements. Where do we get these 3 brachas from? So the Gemara tells us in Masechta Brachas, and Af Memches Samid Beis. Before we read the short piece of Gemara, there's a question that's asked. Why don't we make a bracha on the mitzvah of living in Eretz Yisrael? Whether we should make it every day or once when we come and we intend to permanently live here. The Shaila brought down in Shuvas Svarim, why is a bracha not made on the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, the mitzvah of living in Eretz Yisrael? The Gemara says as follows. Amar Rav Nachman, Moshe tikkun lem Yisrael birkas hazon b'shah shior lem mon. Moshe Rabbeinu set up the first bracha of Birchas Hamazon when B'schus Moshe, the mon came, and when the mon came, people ate mon, so they benched, quote unquote, after they ate the mon, and Moshe Rabbeinu taught them the bracha was Hazon es Hakol. Yoshua tikkun lahem Birchas ha'aretz b'shah shenipnesu ha'aretz. Yoshua taught them the second bracha, Birchas Hamazon. When Yoshua crossed the Yarden and brought the Jewish people into Eretz Yisrael, he set up the second bracha. He taught it to them, Baruch atah Hashem al ha'aretz v'al hamazon. He added the bracha of Noidel Lecha Hashem Elokeinu al shenchat l'avoseinu Eretz chemda toiva urechava, and we ended Baruch atah Hashem al ha'aretz v'al hamazon. Yoshua. David and Shlomo tiknu bonei Yerushalayim. David and Shlomo set up the bracha of bonei Yerushalayim. And I know what many of you are thinking. What benching occurred between Yoshua and David? Quite a few years there. Was there a third bracha? Was there not a third bracha? The Gemara seems to be telling us that David and Shlomo set up the third bracha. And I said earlier that 3 brachas are biblical requirements. So how did they say 3 brachas? How they say 3 brachas before David and Shlomo came around? Excellent question. See Memches Amabeis and Brachas and the Meforshim there. At any rate, the Gemara says, David tikin al Yisrael amecha val Yushalayim Yerecha. David set up the bracha and put in the words, al Yisrael amecha. He was the king of the Jewish people. Val Yushalayim Yerecha. He conquered the city of Yerushalayim. But he didn't build the Beis Hamikdash. Ushlomo tikin al abayis hagolul v'hakodesh. And Shlomo added the words al abayis hagolul v'hakodesh because he built the Beis Hamikdash. At any rate, the Gemara says Moshe made the first bracha Azonas Hakol when the mun came down. Yoshua set up the second bracha Ala Oretz Vala Mozoin when he brought the two Jews into Eretz Yisrael. And David and Shlomo set up the third bracha on Yerushalayim and on the Beis Hamikdash. There are a number of poskim that say that you don't have to make a bracha when you come to live in Eretz Yisrael, the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, for different reasons, different technical reasons in Hilchos Brachos. There are some poskim that say, in fact, you do make a bracha on living in Eretz Yisrael, and the bracha you make on living in Eretz Yisrael is the second bracha in Berchas Hamazon. Yoshua set up the second bracha in Berchas Hamazon when the Jews came to Eretz Yisrael. And what's that bracha? Noida l'cha Hashem Elokeinu al shenchalta l'aveiseinu eretz chemda toivah chava. We want to thank you and praise you, Hashem, for this wonderful land that you promised to our forefathers and that you've given to us. And we end that and we say, Baruch atah Hashem, blessed are you Hashem, al ha'aretz v'al on the land and on the food. So some poskim say that when you live in Eretz Yisrael and you're benching, you should have in kavana, when you say this bracha, that this is your bracha on your mitzvah of living in Eretz Yisrael. So in fact, you can make a bracha if you wash, you bench once a day, twice a day, whenever. The second bracha, Noida l'cha Hashem Elokeinu al shenchalta l'aveiseinu eretz chemda toiva urchava, which I'm living in. Baruch atah Hashem al ha'aretz v'hamazon. Blessed are you Hashem on this land that I'm living in. So it's a bracha on Eretz Yisrael, and not only is it a bracha on Eretz Yisrael, but the historical source for this bracha is Yoshua when he brought the Jews into Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, this is a bracha on coming into Eretz Yisrael. So a person can have in kavanah when he says that bracha in benching, this is my bracha for doing the mitzvah of living in Eretz Yisrael. All Yidden need Yeshua Shav Yeshua, all Yidden need Refuah Shav Refuah, all Yidden need Chamas Shav Nechamas, all Yidden need Brach Shav Brachas. Brachas, Yeshua's Nechamas, and Refuahs can only come through Rebbeinu Shalom the way he wants, through who he wants, and at the time he wants. He's the Echad Yachad Miyuchad. And Refuahs, Yeshua's Nechamas, and Brachas only can occur if they are in the appropriate methods designated by the Rebbeinu Shalom and Halacha. And when we absorb this idea of Echad Yachad Miyuchad from our minds into our hearts, and we live this way, we begin the process of perfecting our own imperfect lives and lifting up our guf to be a piece in the neshama, as we just learned from Chal. And we help the community around us, we help the whole world around us to go in the direction of perfecting an imperfect world. And with that, we help Mashiach Tzidkenu come from here, Amen. Everybody, please be careful. Please take isn't stirring the coals to reach the hotter coals underneath. Yes, it's a malacha d'oraisa, but as we said, that the malacha d'oraisa is constantly done in the Beis Hamikdash on Shabbos. They slaughtered animals, they sprinkled blood, they created fire. All these are malacha d'oraisas, and they were done in the Beis Hamikdash on Shabbos. There's no bigger raya than taking an animal and slaughtering it, which is a malacha d'oraisa, and they did in the Beis Hamikdash. Yeah, so stirring the coals is a malacha d'oraisa, but if the coals are on the floor and you have a way to avoid doing a malacha, so you cover it up with besachta. At any rate, everybody take care of yourselves. Do those things that you should be doing. Don't do those things that, based on your condition, your age, etc., are not necessary to do. Make sure that you keep yourselves healthy and well so we continue learning. And we should be able in a healthy state and in a happy state, go to be makabel pnei Mashiach tzidkeinu b'mher v'yameinu amen, with such a knowledge of Masechta Midas and Masechta Tamid. It's going to be so geschmack to see him and see what go with the building that goes up and see the avod in the building. We're going to look at it and say, I learned this, I know this. I know how to clean the menorah. The menorah is first 5 sticks and then 2 sticks. I know that the ketores is first a silver pan of coal, then a gold pan of coal. And I know that there's a pious 1, a pious 2, a pious 3, a pious 4. I know this and I can see it. B'mher v'yameinu. Amen. Everybody's gesund. Have a wonderful day.